Hey guys, so if you are watching this, it might be that you just want to review what we did or you're choosing to work asynchronously from the class. But this is Freshman Composition 101. And some of you are taking this, auditing this class for English 11. And I'll explain what that means in a minute, but I just want to go through the slides that we were using. So the course in a nutshell. Basically, this course is a half-year course. So if you're taking it for English 11, it's two half-year courses, Freshman Composition 101 and Freshman Composition 102. And as you can probably tell from the title, composition, right? It's about writing. So for the first class, which is Comp 101, we're going to be writing 7 essays. If you're taking this for English 11 credit, you'll just be writing 5 essays because you'll be writing the literacy narrative, the exemplification essay, the summary and analysis, the refutation paper, and the research paper, but you will not have to take the midterm and the final. So if you're taking this class for college credit, you will take the midterm and the final, and if you're taking it for high school credit, you won't have to take those. You will just write the papers, and even the papers will have a modification, a few different modifications for you, so they might be a little bit shorter. I think that's what that says here. Yeah. So students in English 11 will participate in class with modified assignments. So the goal is to help you build the knowledge, skills, and dispositions for this course in the future. So you'll go into this course next year, you'll be familiar with the types of papers that we're going to be writing, and you'll have a leg up on how to write it. And plus this year, you're going to gain so many writing skills. So it's just going to make it that much easier. You'll be more prepared for taking the college class and just life in general. So if you go to Google Classroom, the first essay that we're going to start on is the literacy narrative. It's right underneath classwork on the classwork tab. And if you click on literacy narrative, you'll see that there are 4 documents. That one in the bottom right-hand corner is actually your own personal draft that you're going to do your work on. But the other 3 are, one of them is a doc that has the assignment on it. So you should definitely read through that. Another is a sample student literacy narrative that Gabby wrote in 2016. So we've been working on this one for a while, and this is actually a little bit longer than it needs to be. So don't look at it and say, oh my goodness, this is a really long paper. She wrote a few extra pages longer than it needed to be. But the goal of this paper is to tell 2 stories. So 2 stories that shaped your view of literacy. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There's a literacy narrative rubric for the college students. And as we go into the year, we can talk a little bit more about grades for students who are not enrolled in the college class. But the college class is laid out pretty clearly on the rubric. So before we can write a literacy narrative, we have to have a common definition of the word literacy. So this slide says, regardless of our backgrounds, our ideas of literacy often become deeply ingrained as good or bad, without much thought about how these views came to be. So as a result of not really thinking about those things, many of us have definitions of literacy that could benefit from a thoughtful and honest, close self-examination. So for example, there's different kinds of literacy. If you look at that light bulb over there, there's digital literacy and scientific literacy. But one that I struggle with is mathematical literacy. So I kind of walk around while Chesky always gets mad at me saying, ugh, I'm so bad at math. I have this negative view of myself when it comes to doing math. And I have that view because when I was in high school, I was a year ahead in my math classes, and they were a little hard for me, and I didn't pay attention as much as I should. So it was always my worst subject, but not because I was not able to do math very well, but it was more just that I was not really putting the time and effort that I needed to learn how to do it. So actually, I'm not bad at math, but I walk around telling myself that I'm bad at math. So basically, we're going to do some thoughtful and honest, close self-examination, right? Let's look at, well, why do we feel the way that we feel about our literacy? So whatever kind of literacy it is. So to sort of start from a basic point, here's this kind of complex definition of literacy from UNESCO, which says literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute. using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. So that varying context part is important. It might be that you're thinking in a scientific context, or it might be that you're thinking in a digital context, or maybe even a cultural context, right? Literacy involves a continuum of learning. A continuum is like a timeline, but it goes in both directions. So picture the arrow points both ways. So it's a continuum of learning. You can get better at things, you can get worse at things, you can become more competent, less competent, depending on how much practice you have. So literacy involves a continuum of learning in enabling individuals to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and potential, and to participate fully in their community and wider society. So I would say that those last three things are probably things that we'd all like to achieve, right? Our goals to get to the best of our knowledge and potential, and also to be able to really participate in a meaningful way in our communities, right? And in the world in general. So in class, what we did was we wrote down as many types of literacy as we could think of in 1 minute. And people came up with all sorts of great answers. And you can do this yourself, or you can even just try to Google different types of literacy. A few that we went over that I thought were worth pointing out were scientific literacy, like thinking about the nature of science and scientific concepts, and cultural things that have to do with science, right? Where science interacts with society when you're thinking about like how our actions impact the world around us. Financial literacy. You guys know that Harvey is always talking about this, right? Like the ability to smartly manage finances. I would say my financial literacy sometimes is better than others, but altogether could probably use some work. But maybe you're not that person. Maybe you have fantastic financial literacy. But regardless, when I think about it, I can tell stories of how I got to be the way that I am with my financial literacy, right? Positive or negative. Digital literacy, like this is a big one for you guys in P-Tech. So thinking of all those different branches, right? So maybe it is that you could tell a story about how you loved playing Fortnite and got obsessed with it, and then that led you to want to take a coding class. So then you did, right? So that's a story about building your literacy. News literacy, we're always talking about this in ELA, right? The ability to judge the credibility of something. Is there bias here? Who is profiting from what I'm reading? Cultural literacy, I thought that this was a really smart picture, this iceberg, right? So there's these things that we see in our culture, like language and behaviors and food and observable things. And then there's all of this cultural stuff happening underneath the surface with values and beliefs. And you learn a lot from being submerged into other cultures. So I might, if I was going to talk about cultural literacy, I might choose two stories. Like when I lived in Finland for a while, the culture was very different there. I'm thinking also of when Miss Hesse and I went to Southeast Asia 2 years in a row. Like that was, the culture is very different there. What did I learn about myself and my own culture from those experiences? But it might be also closer to home. Like I teach students who come from different cultures than I do. I could probably tell one or two stories of things I've learned about my own culture and about other people's cultures and the intersection of the two. So for this, as you've heard me saying, for this paper, you're going to be writing two stories in one paper. And here's some things you can choose to do. So you can choose any one of these, or you can expand on this, but you could choose to narrate an early memory about writing or reading, or another type of literacy that you recall vividly. So you have to think about it. Can I tell this story? Do I remember enough? Sometimes you can use a little bit of artistic liberty to add details, and then explain why this event is significant to you now. So I might talk about my soccer coach when I was in Snoopy soccer and how much I loved her and how she made me love soccer. And maybe I'm headed towards some larger story about sports literacy and how I got really into sports. You can describe a person, right? Someone who taught you to read or write, or taught you about another type of literacy, a favorite teacher, a teacher who you didn't get along with, who gave you a negative view about some subject, right? Explain that person's significance. You could, especially if you're doing something about reading and writing, you could identify a book or other text and explain its significance for you in your acquisition of literacy. You could talk about an experience with reading or writing or another type of literacy that you found difficult or challenging. So a lot of times that we learn about ourselves when we think about what challenges us. You could describe a memento and explain how it represents an important moment in your reading or writing or another type of literacy development. So it might be that first book you got or your first computer or something like that. So for next class, what you need to do is you need to write down brainstorm and write down the two events that you'll write about, and for each, write 1 or 2 sentences about that event. And then we also went over how to sign in for attendance. So especially if you're doing this asynchronously, just go onto the Google Classroom and find the link for attendance. All right, so I hope that it was useful to have these slides and have the narration. And if there's anything that you want me to explain further, please just send me an email. And I hope that you're having a great day and keep in touch. Okay, I'll talk to you guys soon.